Brought to you by...
I always love to see a film that explores alternate history. Whenever a filmmaker takes events, often tragic, and turns them on their head, it incites excitement, as these decisions often carry an emotional weight with them, allowing us a glimpse at what it could be like to turn back the hands of time and alter the course of history. We most prominently saw this in Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which dealt with a similar subject matter as we are exploring today. Hello friends, and welcome back to ETF. The Manson Sisters is a disturbingly humorous short film that blends historical tragedy with aspects of chilling psychological thriller and comedic overtone. Presented through the lens of horror thriller, it's an unmistakably Tarantino-influenced tale, set against the backdrop of the infamous Manson family murders at Cielo Drive. The film shifts focus to a what-if scenario, where the infamous Manson girls, who were responsible for the brutal deaths, are targeted in a twisted turn of fate. The film begins in the aftermath of the brutal murders at Cielo Drive, where we meet the surviving Manson girls, seemingly attempting to continue with their lives. As they go about their day, tensions simmer beneath the surface. Their idyllic, albeit unnerving routine is suddenly interrupted by a mysterious and threatening figure. This unwelcome visitor, representing a dark, omnipresent force, presents a danger that shakes the already unstable foundations of their existence. What begins as a perfect day for the Manson girls slowly morphs into a nightmare as the visitors reveal their true intentions, and it becomes clear that the horrors of the past are not so easily escaped. There is no avoiding that the Manson Sisters can be viewed as little more than an homage to the work of Quentin Tarantino, particularly in how it engages with his signature themes, stylistic choices, and revisionist take on history. Best exemplified in Inglourious Basterds and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where historical tragedies are reimagined with violent, cathartic payback. While the Manson Sisters doesn't rewrite history in the same grand fashion, it does subvert audience expectations. Instead of focusing on the victims of the Manson family, as most Manson-related media does, the film turns its attention on the perpetrators, placing them in the role of hunted rather than hunter. This is reminiscent of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's climax, where Tarantino flips the script on real-life tragedy by having the Manson family members be brutally dispatched by Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth. The Manson Sisters, however, takes a more psychological approach. While the Manson girls are not immediately punished, they are haunted and psychologically tormented, much like Tarantino's villains often are before their downfall. Tarantino is heavily influenced by grindhouse and exploitation films, often embracing their raw violence, lurid atmosphere, and morally ambiguous characters. The Manson Sisters channels this aesthetic through its grimy, tension-filled atmosphere, which feels like something pulled from the 1970s horror thriller playbook. Furthermore, the film's depiction of violence as both terrifying and cathartic mirrors Tarantino's philosophy. Tarantino often presents violence in an over-the-top, almost operatic way, but he also understands the psychological weight it carries. In The Manson Sisters, violence is less stylized than in Kill Bill or Django. Instead, it lingers in the background like a ghost, creeping toward its inevitable explosion. This delayed gratification mirrors Inglourious Basterds, where the audience waits anxiously for the final brutal act of retribution. Tarantino is a master of writing morally gray characters, people who are neither fully good nor entirely evil, but exist in a complicated moral landscape. In The Manson Sisters, the protagonists are members of one of history's most infamous cults. Normally, they would be depicted as pure evil, but the film presents them with complexity, showing them as lost souls rather than one-dimensional monsters. This echoes how Tarantino often humanizes criminals and outlaws. In Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Charles Manson is barely present, but his followers are depicted as brainwashed youth, echoing real-life discussions about whether they were victims of manipulation or active participants in evil. The Manson sisters further explore this ambiguity. Are these women truly remorseful, or are they simply afraid of facing the same violence they once inflicted? Tarantino loves playing with these kinds of questions, where the audience's sympathies shift in unexpected ways. One of Tarantino's strongest trademarks is his dialogue, sharp, often humorous, and filled with cultural references. While The Manson Sisters leans more into psychological horror than Tarantino's typical fast-paced exchanges, it still carries echoes of his influence. The way the characters speak, casual yet unsettling, filled with hints of their cult-like devotion, resembles how Tarantino writes his villains. For example, the Manson family members in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood speak with a faux philosophical manner, often regurgitating Charles Manson's rhetoric in a way that sounds both absurd and chilling. The Manson sisters employs a similar technique, where the dialogue reveals the remnants of brainwashing, with the characters speaking in a way that suggests they're trapped in a mindset they can't escape. Tarantino's films often revolve around criminals who believe that they are in control, only for fate to bring about their downfall. Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, and The Hateful Eight all feature protagonists who are killers, thieves, or bounty hunters, yet their fates are dictated by forces beyond their control. In The Manson Sisters, this idea is heightened with a supernatural or psychological horror twist. The characters believe they have moved past their crimes, but their past inevitably catches up with them. This aligns with Tarantino's philosophy. Characters can talk their way around morality, but eventually, violence has consequences. Whether the visitor is a real person seeking revenge or a manifestation of their guilt, the film adheres to Tarantino's tradition of poetic justice. Although Charles Manson himself may not be a central figure in the Manson sisters, his presence looms over the story, in much the same way as it does in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Tarantino chose to minimize Manson's screen time, instead focusing on his followers and the cultural impact of his crimes. The Manson sisters follows this approach, keeping Manson in the background while exploring how his influence continues to shape his followers. This approach aligns with Tarantino's fascination with larger-than-life figures who exert power without needing to be physically present. Whether it's Bill in Kill Bill, Calvin Candy in Django Unchained, or Marcellus Wallace in Pulp Fiction, these characters shape the narrative even when they're off-screen, much like how Manson's ideology continues to haunt his followers. The characters of the Manson girls are presented in a way that allows the audience to feel both sympathy and dread. They are portrayed not as faceless cult members, but as deeply flawed individuals, victims of their own circumstances. Lopez doesn't shy away from portraying them as despicable figures, but she also shows their vulnerability, creating a complex portrait of people who are as much products of their environment as they are guilty parties. The unwelcome visitor is an enigmatic presence in the film, shrouded in mystery. Their motivations are never fully explained, adding to the eerie atmosphere. What makes this character particularly chilling is their calm demeanor, contrasting sharply with the chaos they bring into the Manson girls' world. The visitor is not a screaming force of rage, but a silent, relentless embodiment of fear and judgment. This subtlety is what makes the threat feel so imminent and personal. Lopez's direction is a standout element of the film. Its pacing is deliberate, building tension gradually before plunging into a chilling, albeit humorous climax. There's an almost dreamlike quality to the scenes, blending the mundane with the surreal. The cinematography works in tandem with this feeling, with contrasting light and shadow, emphasizing the duality of the girls' world, one where they seem to live in the calm after the storm, but are never truly free from it. The use of the setting, which shifts between moments of tranquil and horror, is highly effective. Lopez's attention to detail creates an atmosphere where every room, every corner, holds a sense of looming dread. Lopez's visual style blends the grotesque with the everyday, The Manson girls' moments of normalcy, playing games, having breakfast, conversing with each other, are shot in a way that creates a contrast with the violence that will inevitably invade their world. This juxtaposition of calm and chaos is one of the film's most striking aspects. The cinematography captures this with precision, often using framing to trap characters in tight spaces, reflecting their psychological entrapment. The Manson Sisters feels like a dark psychological horror that takes Tarantino's signature themes and injects them with a dose of almost supernatural dread. While Tarantino typically leans towards stylish action and genre blending, this film pays homage by taking his revisionist approach and applying it to a psychological horror framework. It explores themes of violence, guilt, and retribution in a way that feels spiritually linked to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But instead of giving us the satisfying release of watching the Manson killers get taken down, it lingers in the unease of what happens after the crimes. Ultimately, the Manson Sisters serves as an inverse of Tarantino's take on the Manson family, where Once Upon a Time in Hollywood rewrites history for a cathartic ending. The Manson Sisters forces the characters to live with their past, turning their perfect day into an inescapable nightmare. Oh, and there's also this fact that if you get through the entire movie and don't feel the Tarantino influence, the entire ending is ripped right out of Death Proof. I mean it, seriously, they literally do a very similar ending that even uses the same fucking song. Well, friends, that's going to be all for now. If you'd like to check this film out for yourself, I've linked it down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe for more content, and if you really want to help support the channel, we do have a Patreon, but we also have something else in the works that will let you do just that, and get you some really cool rewards in the process. So stay tuned. Until next time, stay safe, tread lightly through the horrors of history, and as always, thanks for watching.